Okay, hi everybody. We are now looking at how to size things for Roblox when you're using Blender GIS. And I've just learned a technique that I think is worth sharing because individual buildings need to be scaled up 5 times for Roblox when you get them out of Blender GIS. And that was a pain until I learned this technique. So let me show you the technique. So we're starting out with this cube that we really don't need. It doesn't matter. Sort of people generally come in here and remove the camera and remove the light, and because we're not going to be using them in Blender, and then hit the 7 key. Let me turn on for you for a second screencast keys so that you can see what I'm doing here. So down here, so now you go and you hit 7 and you're in top orthographic up here. Go to GIS, assuming you've installed that plugin, which you should, Blender GIS, and go to Web Geodata and Base Map, and then I'm using Google Satellite, and I say OK, and then I hit G to call up the base map go-to, and I'm putting in, for my daughter, her address, Wisthoffweg 48 Essen, which is in Germany, and setting my zoom level to about 18, say OK, and there's the map. And their house is somewhere around here, but I want to include the Reva supermarket she likes and the place where she plays hide and go seek, and their playground where I was teaching my son to ride his bike. So once you have that, you hit E for export. That didn't show up. Screencast key sort of goes out sometimes. I don't know why it's faded like this in the weird color, but it is. Anyway, that's the excerpt that we're going to be putting out there. And then you go in and you get your Web Geodata SRTM, which is your terrain map. And that SRTM will give some contours for the slope. It's a digital elevation model. And sometimes it takes some time. Okay, you've got that. I'm streaming right now. And so you can see that the slope does go down in here, and it goes down there. So I can't stop streaming right now. Let me just keep the stream going for a second. For those of you who are watching, just pause. There's a question coming from the video editor in the room. What's the question? No, I can't pause. It's streaming, live streaming. I can't pause until I'm done. Okay, so we'll come back to this and we'll finish this up. So you can see the contour slopes downward. That's built in there. And that's why when the kids ride their bike down here, gravity takes them around and they have to pedal to come up. It shows faithfully that that is what the digital elevation is there. So very cool for that. Now that we have that, you go back up here and you say Web Geodata get OpenStreetMap, OSM, and you go for the building and elevation from object, and then separate the objects because we want all the buildings to come in separated. The elevation object is this map that we just did, and I say OK, and then it is going to populate with all these buildings. Now, some of these are really whacked because the elevation comes from the object, and the object has a edge of the world Columbus didn't fall off thing, or would have fallen off thing. So I'm going to get rid of, by clicking off this, I'm going to get rid of all the buildings, hitting B, that are on the edges of the universe, and hit delete on those because they are really funky. So I'm using the bounding box and coming along here and getting rid of buildings that are outside. It looks like I made a mistake with that building there. Just click off it and see what you can grab here. Might have to go in a little tighter for that. And this eliminates stuff that's not going to be in your game playing field. This is still a pretty large map. And chop those off there. So that's, with the exception of those big buildings there, we can go in later if we want and edit those buildings out if we really don't want them, or we can eliminate some of them now and delete them. We certainly don't need that one. We don't, well, there's that supermarket, the Helveg. She may want to have a walk down there. These are way out of line. This part here doesn't have to be there. This part here doesn't have to be there. And this one here doesn't have to be there. So these edge buildings can come out. Oops. That's still fine for the game. So take out the erroneous buildings that will interfere with the game unless you really need them. And for this one here, I can go into Tab and Edit, and I can select the bottoms here. When you're doing any selection, by the way, in Blender, you won't get everything unless you go into hit Z and go into wireframe, and then when you do your bounding box, you'll get all the points there. And then I can hit G and Z and move them up so that they're not falling off the edge of the world. And now I'll go back out of Z into solid and go out with Tab. Okay, so now I have a playing field, and the thing about Roblox is that Roblox is 5 times larger than Blender GIS on average. And so we want to go in here and we would like to select everything and scale it up, but if you select everything and you hit 5 for the scale, 5 and 5, the only thing that scales is that building there because that was the first building. And so that won't work. So Control Z to get back to that, and Control Z and Control Z to bring it back in its place. So here's what you do. You select the landscape first of all, and there it is, Export Google Satellite Map, and scale that up 5 times in X, Y, and Z. Okay, so there's our map now is scaled up, but of course the buildings are all really tiny under there. And we'd like them all to be on the size of this. Now if you made them all into one object, you could join everything and then scale it, but then you'd have to unjoin each one, and I don't want to have to do that. I deliberately brought them in as separate objects. So what do? So what you do is you go up into Preferences and you make sure that the Copy Attributes menu is toggled, because by default it is not. And the Copy Attributes menu is what lets you move attributes from one thing to another. So if that is toggled, then you select the objects that you want to scale, like all those buildings. Then you finally Shift select the object that is already scaled, and then right-click and do... Oh, did I do something wrong? Ah, sorry. And then do Control C for copy. That's what it is. Control C, and then do Copy Scale, and boom. Look at that. All the buildings are now scaled back up and in their right position, which is pretty darn cool. The only thing is we lost Rava, which is the one building that we wanted to come in. So I've got to figure out why Rava disappeared. And that thing that's happening here, by the way, when it kind of disappears, that's called clipping. And so when you're in view, you want to make sure that your clip start is really small and your clip end is really big. And usually I do about 10,000 for the clip end. And then, oh, that got really crazy. Why is that? Let's see what happens at 5,000. Oh, even worse. Let's see what happens at 100,000. There, they're kind of back. So the clipping's getting really strange. Ah, well, that clipping there, it bounced back up. All right, so now it's not acting weird. So somehow we lost Rava, but anyway, that's how you scale up multiple objects at a time. And maybe if I go back in and say GIS and import the OpenStreetMap buildings and bring it in, but this time with not an elevation from the object because the object's like gotten crazy. Let me see if I can get that building in there. It may not even know what the object is anymore. Yeah, it's probably having trouble with that. Yeah, it's really going crazy. All right, so what we're going to try to do then is we'll just redo the procedure because watching it twice reinforces it. So I'm going to see if I can crash Blender. Close the program. Let's try it again. All right, let's do it again. So Blender up here and select everything and delete it and hit the turn on my screencast keys. That's another plugin I had to put in so that you can see down here what I'm doing. Now go to hit 7 for top orthographic. If you hit the 5, it'll be perspective. You want orthographic, GIS, Web Geodata base map, and G for go to, and then your address. Oops, I hit the wrong zoom level. Let me go to 17 or 18. Seems to work well for this. There it is. Okay. Now E to export that. Now go to GIS and say that we're going to get the SRTM information, which is the digital elevation. Okay, and now that I have that information, which gives me that slope down the hill, I'm going to go to Web Geodata again, get the OSM, get the building information, elevation from the object, and separate all the objects. And hopefully now Rave is going to come in. There it is. Rave is there. So I don't know why it didn't work, because that's the building that we want. So then again, you can take the map itself and size it up 5 times. Okay, and then, oh, kind of lost it there. There it is. Again, there's that clipping problem that you may find, so let's bring the clipping here down to 20 for clip start, and let's make this 100,000, and then we should be able to zoom in and out. Yep, no clipping. Now the buildings are floating way over. But of course I didn't eliminate the outside buildings, did I? So let me go back. And now remember, oh, what happened here? What happened here? Oh, because I'm upside down. That's why. Ain't that interesting? All right, so all those extra buildings we can get rid of once again with the B for bounding box and grab them and delete them. Oh, got rid of everything. Shouldn't have done that. Control Z, get rid of that. Let's do this again. This is a different map with that other complex not in it that we had last time. It's okay. We'll play without that. Except I don't want to get that out of there. Okay, delete those. Same thing here. And delete that. Delete this and that one there. And then there's going to be some spurious ones that we can see from down here that we can eliminate. And part of what you can do is just hit the bounding box and go right underneath. And the ones that are under there, except I don't want that, so I got to shift off of that. Okay, those ones there get deleted, as do these buildings here. Again, I don't want that, so I'm going to hit shift on that to deselect it. And these here are crazy buildings. Shift select that to deselect it and out. All right, so there's our playing field. And now we take this, might as well save at this point. So do a save as, and I'm going to save it as Westhoffen Wegblend. Okay, and now come in here and scale it 5 times in every dimension. That's good. Now the little world under here has to be all selected. So you select off of that, select all of your buildings, and oops, select all your buildings. And why is it selecting it with that? We don't want it to select that just yet. Okay, there's all the buildings, including, it would seem, the Rava, which should fit over here once it gets large. See, because that that is where the Reva belongs. So now we will click on the object that has been sized and hit Control C. This is the crucial part, copy, scale, and boom. All of the buildings are now, including the Reva supermarket, are now on their proper place. Now they're a bit too high. They look awkwardly high, and I probably should have set the elevation differently. But the other thing I should be able to do now maybe is change the attribute of all by changing the attribute of 1. Let's see if that works. If I take the Reva and I go into tab and take the top of it, again by using Z and going into wireframe and then selecting the top of the building and then bring it down G in Z and shrink it down a little bit to something more reasonable. Now the question I have, and I will see if this turns out to be true, is can I apply that to everything else? So the first thing I want to do is take this mesh and I want to hide it hitting the H key so it's gone away. That's the building I want to get the attribute on. If I select all the others and use my bounding box to get them all, and then deselect the Reva and then reselect the Reva and hit Control C, copy, scale. That might work, but it doesn't because we're using a, and I guess you can't apparently, you can't apparently do it with the edit mode. So although no, I suppose one could take, I wonder if you can take a bunch of these and then go into edit and simultaneously edit them all. If you take the top but of course the Reva has to be deselected. So we don't want the Reva selected. So maybe what I should do is go back into object mode and take the Reva, which I should, oh, it says Reva. It's even, look at that. The name of that building, because it's a public building, is even in there. I'm going to hit H to hide that. And let me take all of these and go into edit. If it'll let me go into edit. Let me go to edit. You're going to go into tab, tab, tab. What is tab doing here? We should be in object mode. Now we're in edit mode. Yeah, okay. So if I select everything and go into edit mode, there we go. And then put it in a side perspective and take the tops of each of these and continue to select my top vertices of basically everything. Then with the exception of those buildings there, which look tiny, I should be able to take the G in Z and, yep, bring it all down to some reasonable height, with the exception of these buildings here, which now appear way too tall. So this is not going to be accurate. There's better ways to do this part, but I'm just trying to get in basic ideas for the game. So now when I hit Control H, nope, that's hiding everything, sorry, Shift H, nope, Alt H, yeah, to bring everything back and then go back to solid form. My buildings are there and they're a bit more reasonably, the height is a bit more reasonable for the game. And I have to individually go into buildings and make them their proper height. But this gives a landscape to move around. The only other thing now is that we've got to do roads, and there is, in OpenStreetMap, in the GIS, there is highways. The problem is they come in as single lines, and I've found that to be more difficult to work with than making my own roads. It just makes a single line across here and a single line across here, and that's hard to work for what we want to do in Roblox. So one thing you can do is take an object like this polygon, or even just use a cube, but the cubes are ridiculously small at this point. So take one of these and hit Shift D to duplicate it and turn it around and rotate it. You'll have to set the origin to the geometry so you can spin it on itself, and work with this as a way of painting basically a road. And so what I would do is I would go into Edit here, and just as we did before, I would take the top vertices and I would smush this down with GZ. Just go down till it's just almost a plane, but not quite. And then coming on the top view, once we get back into object mode, there it is. And then let's go back and hit Z and go into solid. Then take it and hit S and scale it, but scale it in the X direction or the Y direction, depending on what is working. And once you have it about the size of the highway, then you can hit G in X and Y. Well, maybe that won't work. Do an you go into edit mode. Let's do that, and again go into wireframe for the. Ooh, didn't want to go for that. Go into wireframe to gather those points, because this way, let's hit the C key here and let's make sure we get those. Now we should have all the points grabbed there. Yep, both of them. And now get out of wireframe solid. And now if you hit extrude, you can make this thing extrude in the direction that you want to make your highway. Now, one of the problems with this is that I don't have it rotated quite properly. So let's deselect this and select just these 2 points for now, and then go back into the solid and try to kind of bend this in the shape, and we can do that. And then once it's sort of in the shape, and let me see if I can grab both of these points too. Oh, it came way up in the air. Alright, so that's a bit awkward. Sometimes this works badly when you are dealing with a surface that has a digital elevation model. So if this is the case, then let me abandon this approach, and instead let me delete this, and let me add an actual plane. And then move that plane, which is very small, down to here, and then scale that plane progressively up until we can see it. There's our plane. Okay, and then rotate the plane and move it and rise it up. That's G in the Z direction till it's sort of sitting. Well, it's way up there right now. Let's bring it down. There we go. And the plane should only have 2 points instead of 4. I shouldn't have tried to use a box. That was a mistake. But the other problem is that there's a contour to this line, so this is going to be a little bit awkward. But we can now take this and go into the edit mode and select these 2 points, because there are only 2 of them now, and then grab them and drag them across. But before you do that, make sure that you're in orthogonal top, so that when you hit the G and you drag it, it doesn't move up and down, and it might still, but this is basically where the highway is. Yeah, that's lying pretty well right now. So we have a bit of the highway, and then you can come back and you can, whoops, if you're in user perspective, top orthographic, you can make some shapings in here. So that gives you a bit of what that highway is going to look like. And as for the street here, let me save. We can do the same thing, and you can, of course, come out of edit, take this object and duplicate it, and then move it, again, get into move it across, and then align, set the origin to geometry so it's in the center here, and then rotate it so you can begin to get your other highways in place. These are markers for the game that you're going to use. And as for the street that the house is on, we can also duplicate this and rotate it and move it and rotate it. And we can change the dimensions. One way to do it is by scaling it in the Y dimension and scaling it in the X dimension doesn't really help, but scale it in Y to make it thinner. Scale in Y. Okay. And then make this road section go in front of the house. Let's scale it one more time in Y to make it a little bit smaller. Move it, and now see how weird that got. So it's a mess because I went into perspective and I should not have. So might as well delete that, and of course when all else fails, go in as I showed you and go to mesh and put a plane in, and then scale the plane up and move the plane over where you want the road to begin. And it's easy to rotate the plane because the dot is in the center. And now bring that plane up in Z. And then make sure it's in the right place. I don't think it is. Where is that plane? Where did it go? It's there, but where is that? So that plane we're going to call this Hofweg. All right, and that way I can find it, and it must be way up. Look at how high up it is, way up there. So GZ, and bring it down, and now hit the period key to look at it. It's way too low. Bring it up to the world. All right, and now we are right on the land now. And then go in tab into edit, grab the other point, and then you can hit G to drag it out to the end of the road before the road bends. So it looks like I can hit G all the way down before the other road is there, and it's still too high perhaps, but it's all right. And then you can take an individual point, and if you're again in orthographic, then you can bend it around. Same thing with taking this point here and bending it up there. And then when you go into object mode, you can move this appropriately down onto the landscape, keeping in mind that the landscape is a bit uneven because it's got contours and terrain, and I don't want to go in and be responsible for making a whole different mesh that can move up and down. for now, that's going to be our basic outline, because what we're really doing is creating outlines that can go into Roblox, and then we paint the rest of it. The other thing I want to be aware of doing is to get the playing field, and for that, let's see, if I were to, well, let's get one more road in. I'm going to copy this and move its geometry, its origin to geometry, and then rotate it, and that'll give me a marker for that road. And I will take in edit these 2 points and drag them out so that this connects, and then I will, for this, what should I do? I can take a circle, maybe, or, yeah, as a marker, because in Roblox I'll take care of adding in the actual, I'll make pavement in Roblox's mesh tool, and I'll make grass there. So I really am just using Blender as a marker. That's what Blender is really about. So if I add a circle here, and I'm not sure it went, where did the circle go? Circle is here, so I'm going to call this the playground center, and move that circle if I can find it. There it is. Move it there, and then scale that circle up and up and up and up. Will it even let me circle? Where's that circle? Way underneath somewhere. There it is, down there. So GZ it up to the top there somewhere, and GZ it down. But I still have to scale it and scale it. The scale probably should be, let me see what it's, 1. Oh, that's huge. Okay, we don't want 1. Okay, so negative 75,000 or whatever the heck it was extreme. So that's a little circle. So we've got to do uniform scaling. It's funny because I'm not diving into it. Whoops. So when I hit the period key, it doesn't even show up. Alright, that's weird. Seems like we lost everything now. In that case, let me see if I can find a building. There it is. Okay. So what happened to our circle? Our circle is disappeared. I can't even find our circle. This we'll call, I'm not sure what this road is called. This is, that plane is Frillendorf Street, and that one, this plane here is the A40 Autobahn. And then our circle has completely disappeared. So we'll try to create another circle. I don't know where it went. Oh, playground center, that's why. All right, so let's see if we can continue to scale it up and scale it up and scale it up. Seems like no matter how I zoom in, the circle is almost infinitely small. The playground center, and if I scroll through here, it doesn't like it. So I'm not sure what's actually going on. If I make this 0.5 and this 0.5 and this 0.5, the circle still stays really crazy small. So I think we'll have to try this again. We're going to delete this circle, and we're going to add a, I'm going to add a cylinder. I could do, but I'd rather do a circle. Where's my circle? I can't see what the circle is doing. It's over there. I bring it over here. I make sure that the Z location is at 0, and the X and Y location is fine. It's still way underneath here because the Z is, oh, that's the rotation. I don't want to touch that. Although not that it matters, since it's just a circle, it can rotate any way it wants to. But if I bring the Z location up, you'd think it would be moving up. Yes, it is moving up, all right. Well, GZ is better, and it looks like our world is very high on that scale. It's still way underneath there. And bring it up. And there it is. And our circle here is so tiny, but there it is. It's showing up now. Now we scale it and scale it. Ah, now it's actually working. All right. Keep scaling the circle and moving it into there, and make sure, because the circle has no face. So let me hit select it, go into edit, and then I can make it conform to the circle by selecting individual points. And this is how we will define the inside of the playing field. Okay, oops. Control Z that. A little bit painstaking. Okay, almost done here. Because I know that in the game the kids will have fun riding their Roblox character on bicycles in there. So when you have that and you select all of it, then you hit F for face and you get a face. And that will define that part. And then GZ and bring it down. But again, it has contours. So that's what's wrong, and that's what was fun about it in real life, is that the kids could go down the hill. And so here you can then go into a view like this side view and select a bunch of these points . And we can warp this to go down. It's going to be a bit awkward, but if we stretch it down, so we do G and Z and bring it down to the bottom, then we're creating an object that will have those contours. So you can get as detailed as you want in this. It's going to be another thing when we get into Roblox, and we'll have to use these objects for reference for the terrains. And so far I haven't figured out a very good way to use their digital elevation map tool. They have one, but it's very, very awkward. And so you play around with these points. And that kind of gives what the object would look like. As you can see, it's now a sort of distorted area, but it gives the contour. Okay, so we're getting there for what we want to export into Roblox. The only other thing is that the kids love to play hide and seek on this area here, and I should take this, let me make sure that the origin is to the geometry, and rotate this around and shrink it down so I have a basic idea of where that part of their familiar territory is. And there, it's sort of that's sort of good there. To put that there, and then maybe if I duplicate that and rotate it, then shrink this a little. If I want to, I can go into Edit here and take these points alone and bring them back. So it gives me a marker for that, and I'll go out of Edit, and I'll take this and copy it one more time and rotate it and put it here. It needs to be rotated just a little bit more there, and then edited. Let me first straighten this one out, and then grab the other one, and then grab it and make it longer so that it goes to the back of the house there. And I will call this one here, I'll call this back alley. And you can do that for each of these different pieces. But the other thing I need to do is I need to find the house of the kids. And it looks like this is their house, badly modeled by this. But this is the one right there. And it will be known as, and you can do a view filter by scenes, view layer. It used to be that you saw it by one that was, oops, I shouldn't have done a new collection. Sort alphabetically objects just visible or selected or active. So you do selective, and that way I can find that one and now change this to this Torfweg 48 kids house. All right, so now I've got to take the burden on of modeling that. There's this solar panels that the neighbor has, but at least we have the positional information in there. And maybe I should make this longer because I know that this is the actual house. And so if I take that, and things are off a little bit, let me go into orthogonal view again. Take that and make sure that it's scaled out in, not X, scaled out in Y, but that's a weird Y, it's not a local. Let me go from global to local, and now scale it in Y. Oops, didn't work either. Why not? So I want it local, normal, gimbal view. So the transform orientation, scale in Y. Now it's not letting me do it according to the view. So I thought that local would let me scale in the direction I wanted to. So since I can't do that, I will go in and grab the points here and oops, yeah, and then I can scale it using the G key to make it the length of the house like that, and then bring this in there. And really these are the units that were brought in weren't perfect, but nobody's going to notice for the rest of the game. I can just bring that into here, and bring that into here, and bring that into, oops, into here. for now. All right. So that is the house. And then the garden, one easy way to target the garden is, of course, to add a plane. And we'll do that so we know where their garden is. And we will add a plane, and we'll move it over to the garden there. And we will scale it way up and move it in G until it comes up. And then rotate it, and then scale it to about the size of the house, and rotate it, and then go into Edit and grab these 2 points and drag it down to the back garden, and then we have this plane which we will call Westhofweg garden. And then that's way up in the air. We don't want that. Bring it down to the ground. All right. And so we have the basic outlines as Westhofweg 48 garden. All right, so now we can start exporting these to Roblox. That's when it gets exciting. So the first thing that I will do is I will take the kid's house and export that block. And so I go export, and I do wavefront object, and I make sure it's selection only, and everything else seems to be okay. This is going to go in Roblox exports from, not exports from, exports to Roblox, and I will export that object. I will also take the garden, and I will export that wavefront object, make sure selection only. You always have to make sure that it's selected, and call it garden object. And let's put this in and call this playground. Call this Westhofweg playground. And let's make sure that we have the roads, and let's call this one the because everything's from Westhofweg, so we're going to go Westhofweg A40. And we'll do the Frillendorf Street. Export Frillendorf Street. All right, and let's do Reva for sure. And I know that my daughter would really want to have Georgina's house in there, and I believe that it could be this one. Hard for me to tell. She goes up the street here, and she comes in here. It's the one with the garden. I'm going to assume that it's this one and that that's the trampoline. I'm going to call it, and if she tells me I'm wrong, I'll do it later. Georgina's house, question mark, and export that. And she'll need a road to get there, which is this one here. call it alley to Georgina, and then this, the back alley, let's make sure that that one is part of our initial set. 48 back alley, and let's make sure that the road from here is exported to back alley, and the road here, which is Wisthoffweg itself, road dot object, and finally the road to the playground. Okay, that should give us enough to start with for our landscape. So now it's into Roblox Studio. So you go to Roblox, and where's Roblox? Roblox. There it is. Okay. Let's bring that over there. And yeah, we're doing good so far with that. Although it didn't update for some reason. Why? Why didn't it update? Because I have to pick a different screen for this. There's a lag. Ah, there it comes. Okay. All right, so now we have Roblox, and we want to create a new, erstellen means to create, so we're going to create a new game, and we're going to call this, we're going to start it on a flat terrain. Although, interestingly, maybe we could do it as an obby. Let's do it as an obby and see what happens. Something's holding this up. Basic setting. I want to do it as an obby. Create a game. Create game. I'll see. So we create game with an obby in it, which is an object of weight. So it's looking for Roblox Studio. Okay, so that should come up. And wait for it. Seems to take forever. Forever and ever and ever. Okay, loading place. So it's got the obby stuff is already in there, but I'm going to add my own stuff in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create, insert an object, and that object is going to be a mesh part. There's my mesh part. And I'm going to call this mesh part, can't use proper names in this, so I'm just going to call this Kids House. And from there, go to the folder here and open up for exports for Roblox and go down to what was the model of the house. Just a simple block, but when it comes in, it'll say, do you want to resize it? And I will say no. And it has location data. This is the crucial point. So I'll say, yes, move it to the given location. And then somewhere in there, and I have to hit the F key to find it, somewhere in there is where the actual kid's house is, way above the obby. Oh, that's interesting. I don't know what we can do about that yet, but let's continue our location data thing. Maybe we'll have to, maybe we can move everything down, because the next thing you do is you hit Control D as opposed to Shift D to make another object, and we'll name this object the kid's backyard, and all I have to do is keep it highlighted and go back down and add in the kid's backyard, which was the garden. And again, don't resize the mesh, and yes, move it to the location, and it comes in. Now it comes in without any obvious material or color, so I don't know if that's going to work or not. Okay, so one of the problems with a plane is that sometimes the planes get really funky. But let's keep trying. So I'm going to move this over. Oh, it gave that a concrete thing. I didn't want to do that. But the kid's backyard is kind of unsubstantial, which is bizarre. At any rate, we can do the same thing again and make another instance, and this one will be friend's house. That'll be Georgina's house, and we will go in here and we will go to Georgina, and no, we're not going to resize it. Yes, we're going to put it in, and supposedly, there it is, where it's supposed to be. Way out of bounds from our obby, but that's the basic location. Now it may be that one of the problems I had, and I'm going to try this again with the backyard, it may be that when I did the backyard here, there was no material attached to this, and that's why it comes up with no material. So rather than use raster mat or use nodes, I don't want to use nodes, I need to create a new material for this. Let me try a base color of green and see if when I export this with a material, if it now has any substantialness to it. So I will go and export the object and find the garden, which was this one here, and re-export it to cover that up. And now come back in here and go to the backyard and re-import the backyard, because there it has a color. No, it's still insubstantial. Now that does happen from time to time with meshes that are not that are only one-dimensional. So before I try this, I'm going to try one more mesh. I'm going to take the friend's house, I'm going to duplicate that, and I'm going to call this the A40, or maybe just call it highway. And find the highway and see if it comes in, and if it doesn't, then we know yeah, it's not coming in. A40 did not come in. But maybe the playground will come in. So what if I change this to playground and put that in? Because that has, I thought, some dimension to it. That would be the garden, 48, the road, alley, playground object. That did come in. So there is that. And maybe they'll do with some other things that'll come in. So the playground, the duplicate this and make this one into the, we have the Rava. No, we didn't do the Rava yet. So I'll call it supermarket and bring that in. And that would be that one there. And there it comes, okay. So some of these things are happening. Now that gives me a bit of dimension to start playing with. And what you do then is you come in here and, although I think everything has to be moved down in this game, but maybe not. But you want to create a landscape. Maybe instead I can move the whole thing down here, but maybe I'm going to have to move stuff down, because what happens is you go to regions and you have these tools for creating a region, and you click on this and you make these regions which have to then cover everything that you're making. The problem is that they're actually rather small, the regions, when you actually get down to it. So when you're moving the region underneath something, it's really hard to see like where the region is. And then you have to try to scale the region as wide as you can. That's as wide as it'll let me do this one individual region. And it looks like it's huge, but it's not, because it's not in the right location. And as you move this down, you have to find it where it intersects with your models. And you should see it at some point pass through, but it's really tricky to know like where the region really is when you and that's why I probably should have started this whole procedure with a terrain rather than an ubi, because I can't find easily dragging in here. Usually you hit the F or focus key to get to something, but we haven't generated the region yet. And you can go into the front view, and that's not letting me go anywhere. There's my region, but like the world is kind of crazy. So making an ubi was a mistake, obviously. I don't know if I can... I didn't publish this yet. Let me get out of this, discard all these changes. Let me go back to, or maybe I should start in Roblox Studio instead of in Roblox. And Roblox Studio, open it up, ignore that. This is the one I was just creating. I don't think there's a way to delete it at this point. It's loading that place, yeah, which I didn't want to do. All right. Discard those changes. There's something weird in Roblox about not being able to delete your own creation. So maybe I make a new, and I will start with a flat terrain. And from this flat terrain, let's see what happens. Although maybe the problem is that I should really set this to 0. That's what you should really do, is select everything here now and GZ it. Oh boy. What weirdness is this? If you hit Z, it gets really crazy. User perspective, front orthographic, and just bring it all down near the center line. And by having it by the center, then we'll have to re-export the parts that we exported, which is a bit of a pain, but that way the information will be closer to what 0 is. It was way too high. And this was the Stoffweg Reva, which is that one. It's not an import we want, it's an actual export. Sorry about that. Export, wavefront, and then go to Reva and export it again. That one worked. Let's do the export on the playground, which is that one there. And do make sure that your triangles, oh, that's a problem. The triangles should never exceed 10,000, and that is one of the big problems. I'm glad that that happened, because we need to point that out. When you're exporting, you should do a Shift-H to make sure that only that is shown. Now the triangles are only 37, you see. And also we should set the origin to geometry. That helps as well. Let me hit save on this. And export only that. So now we have the Reva, Stoffweg or Reva, and it'll be much smaller. Then you hit your Alt-H to get everything back, and let's find the house there. And now hit the Shift-H so that only that's there. And again, take the geometry and set it to the origin, and then export that object, which is this. And then hit your, not Control-H, but, sorry, Alt-H to bring everything back. Let's try then the, oh, it didn't come back. I didn't want to hide that. Where did it go? Alt-H supposed to bring everything back. Cap locks, Shift-H, nothing, Alt-H. It didn't come back. Oh, it went way down to there for some reason. Not sure why. Let's bring it back up. Okay. Now hit the Shift-H, so it's the only thing that we can see, and export it again. Because now it only has 10 triangles. Now Alt-H brings everything back. Let's go for the background there, and let's Shift-H it and export it as the garden, and Alt-H everything back into existence. And then we will, I think we did Reva, or did we not do Reva? Yes, I think we did. Okay, and then let's do this part here, and once again, it shouldn't be 13,000 triangles, which you see down here. It should be very few. So when I go to Shift-H, no, Alt-H, no, what's it doing? I need to be on this. Alt-H, Shift-H, Shift-H. There we go. Then it's only 30 triangles. Has to be under 10,000 for Roblox. And make this the playground. And then let's try to get the kid's house there. And then again, Shift-H and export the object. And that would be this house there. I have to make sure I have to, it said do only selection. Okay, then we're fine. And then, so it is a tedious process, as you can see. Oops. And let's see if we can get the road in front of the house. And selecting that only, and hit Shift-H, export and make that Vistofeg Road. There it is. Okay. And now let's try this. And once again, right-click, insert a mesh part. Call that mesh part Kids House. Go into the folder. Find it. There. Open it. Don't resize the mesh. Send it to the given location. And then it sits right on the landscape where it should. So we're doing much better now than we were previously. Now duplicate it and change one of them into the kids' garden and open that up, and it should be the big garden object. Now it didn't show up. So that is weird. Something is wrong with that. Let's then not deal with it as a garden, but let's go for the kid's house, friend's house, because I can turn any of these objects into any other object. And that would be, I should use consistent naming, obviously. And I forgot that you can't use proper names in Roblox. Now you can see that we're off the landscape when we get to the kid's house. Now when we duplicate this and we make this new version of it the playground and put that in there, that's also way off the map, and those sort of define a lot of the extent of the map. So we have to create, we've got to create a landscape around that. And you're probably thinking, what if you just did the whole landscape? I've tried it and it doesn't work. It's too big. You've got to do it in pieces for some weird reason. I should put Rava in, that's for sure. So I'm going to take this and duplicate it and make this supermarket. And open that up, and it is back alley playground. Okay. So that comes in, defines another piece of the territory over there, and we did do the street in front, I think. And I can't call it that. I'll just call it Kids Front Street. And take that and put that in. And that would be Vistofeg Road. Huh. That's weird. That's showing a problem. When that happens, go back into Blender and make sure that you are exporting it properly. So there's the road, and that's all I want to see. So I select it and hit Shift H, and let me give it a color. And this one will be sort of purple blue. Alright, and I'm also going to change the origin to the geometry, and I'm going to save this, and I'm going to export this. Make sure selection only, and this is Vistofeg Road. So I have this, and I go into here, and I go to Vistofeg Road. Still not loading. Not quite sure why. Let's see if it does come in. No. So there's some weird stuff. that happens that I've never been quite clear about. Like you would think, now sometimes if you make this into an object, it can help. So if I go into Edit and I select the whole thing and I do an extrusion in Z, I give it a little bit of dimension, and then go out of that. Now that object has some dimension, and if it was rendered it would look like this because it's purple. And it never shows up in solid for some reason, but let me try to export this over it and export. It's only got 12 triangles, so it's not a lot. And try the and it still just doesn't like the mesh. Maybe because it's so large. Nope, it came in. All right, so that's one of the things that you start working with, that sometimes things need dimension. But let's just get into then making the landscape cover this for a second, because what you do then is you go to regions and you start to click and you try to make as big a region as you can, and you want to flatten it as well because it's like really huge. So you're doing this sort of like making this region and making it as big as possible, and you're always fooled in Roblox into thinking it's really huge what you've just made, except that it comes in at a really weird location. So when you actually go to these tools here and go to move it, it's actually really tiny, and you bring it down until you can see it sort of match up, and you hit the F key to sort of get in there, and then you try to make it match up and to your other terrain that's there. And there's always going to be these little bumps, which is crazy. And when you go to resize it, you can't make it much bigger than that standard block. There's supposed to be a tool that lets you pick the size. Anyway, you make your tile, if you like, and try to match it up as best you can. And then when you've got it where you want it, then you do a fill, and you fill it with, say, grass, and you say okay, and boom, you get some grass. And you can then use like just this really awkward tool to try to match it up. As you can see, if you then go to resize, I mean, you can, maybe that's the way to do it, to sort of make it whatever looks like the right size relative to that. And that looks like it matches up pretty well, actually. And try to get it to match up. And then you can copy it and hit paste, and then move that tile in that specified direction, and then hit copy again, and then hit paste, and start building out your landscape and it's so awkward. But this is how you're going to make your game terrain match what you want. And then hit copy again. And of course, if I move this, it just disappears because that was the original. So hit paste, and then boom, butt it up there. And I don't know if you can just keep hitting paste. You might, yeah, it looks like you can. So you just start building it up and going paste, paste. Now, of course, the terrain in reality is sloping, and we don't have that slope. And there is this digital, in Generate, there's a digital elevation map thing, and it just hasn't worked for me well enough. So I abandoned it. You can't, once you've put them together, you're kind of stuck, unfortunately, and you'll have to do your smoothing later on. But this is about the only size tile that you can use. And you might as well do it all at once, or you'll just have to go through this whole process again. And you can see here, so here's the awkward part, because oops, that was a mistake, because actually it's lower. The actual terrain here does slope down. And so somehow we're going to have to develop that and work on that if we want it to be faithful to the terrain of the actual place, because that is where the slope goes, and we'll have to try to make it gently go down to that slope. And it's really hard to get into it's really hard to make these things work properly like that. Because you can't go back and select another tile. Like that's just, it would end up making another tile. So it's really awkward in that regard. But that's the way that you do it. That's the way that you start creating a landscape so that kids can move around. And if I bring in, you can keep going back to Blender, and you can keep exporting different elements from this. Maybe now at the A40 I can put in, if once again I go into Edit and select all of it, and then do an extrusion and bring it down just slightly to make a little bit of contour there, and give it a material as a road, and then isolate this, look at the number of triangles, 12, and then export it as a wavefront object and make it the A40. Generally, things work out when you do this. So if I take the kid's house there, the friend's house, and sometimes you can't click on objects in this map and get anywhere. You have to actually click on it up in here in the Explorer. Control D to make a copy of it, call this the highway, and then bring in that highway right there. And it did come in, okay. Yay for that. Which gives you a little bit more of the dimension of our growing map. And then we should do the same thing, but you know what's weird is, like, why is it so big? Like it should be just that. And what I do with something like this is I'm going to have to go right back into regions and make a region, which again is really awkward because it's sort of non-uniform. See how it drifts like that? So you make it as, you just make your region, and then you go in and you do resize, and you make it, it's not even going to let me make it. Lovely. It won't do any resizing. All right. That was weird. So let's try the highway again. And now this region thing is getting really wacky. So let's get off of that. And let's try to deselect. Okay. Sometimes it acts really weird. Now go to regions and make your region and then try to resize your region, which it's not doing. Okay. It's acting very weird. So there's some kind of memory issue going on here. And it could be because this is such a big object once I made a dimension, even though it only has 12 triangles. We can try to zoom in on this highway part of the landscape and make it thinner, or we can actually undo and undo and undo and undo and see if it'll even go back to being a plane. That's where we were. There it is when it was a plane. If we do an extrusion in Z, whoops, Control Z, grab it, do an extrusion in Z and make it just slight, and then re-export Alt Shift H. And that didn't have any color, so put a material on it. And we say to it to export it as a wavefront as the A40 and try it again. It's come in, and it's come in a little bit better. I still need to get out of the region thing. So it's hard to know. I can make it concrete. I can change the color. All right. And everything's looking a little bit better. And so there's that. I should bring in the path from the kid's house to the so there's the back alley there. Now you can try to join some of these objects together, like this alley here going there, and you would hit Control J. You can separate them later if you had to, and we can call this the alleys. The problem with this is that it'll make one big mesh. Now we should not do that, because what it does is it makes a big mesh and your character will bump into that mesh. So don't do that. That is a mess to try to do. Don't try to join objects up, because this entire plane will be a massive mesh that will mess things up. And I don't know if it's going to let me undo this. Yes, it does. So you have to do them separately. So back alley. I don't know if let's try this without giving it dimension. And call this Weg 48 to back alley object. If it doesn't come in, we'll try giving it dimension again. So I'll just duplicate the highway, and I'll call this back alley, and selecting it, give it its new coordinates. Big. Back alley, where are you? back alley. It seems like it's already got problems. Yep, it's got problems, so it didn't show up. So we go here and we hit tab and we select everything and use period to come close to it, and then we do a extrusion in Z and do the slightest extrusion that we can. Give it a material once again, and let's put the origin to geometry so it's easier to move around, and export it. And we call this again back alley. Get rid of that one. Try to bring this one in. And it's still got problems. Oh, but it did come in. All right. So it's a matter of keeping to build this thing out. And let's do save to file as kids house or kids neighborhood. When you're doing these things for your kids, you're also learning cool stuff. But you see how this whole mesh is there? That's what I meant. If you tried to do the other, the whole terrain would be that mesh. So it gets really messy when you do that. So when we go now to the other piece of the alley, which is this one here, and we do a Shift H, we're going to have to go into edit, we're going to have to select everything, we'll do a slight extrude in Z, and then make it really tiny, and then give it a material, and export that. And this was the back alley to Georgina, and bring that in by taking this and duplicating it and calling this alley to friend, and there it is. Yeah, and it's joining up. Okay. And then the other one was, oops, right, we have that one, we have the back alley, and we have the front road. So that one was actually alley from this to back alley, and Shift H that, and export as the road 48 to back alley. I think it's that one. Or I can give it a new name. I'll just call it Bischoff Weg Road to Back Alley. Take that, copy this, and call it, or duplicate that, and call it Kids Road to Back Alley, again because it doesn't allow you to put in proper names. Road to Back Alley, there it is. And it didn't show up, and probably because there was no material. So we need to give it a material. Also set the origin to the geometry, very complicated procedure here. Somebody else can figure out a better way to do it. Just a lot of trial and error for doing this. Now it shows up, which is a good sign. And it's not showing up. Or is it underneath the ground? Let me do a move, see. No, it's not showing up. So what is it about that? Why is that not? Maybe it's a collision. That's possible. It's a collision factor. It could be because these things are already here, and what you sometimes have to do is make sure that there is no collision on, and that it's not anchored. But I don't think these things are anchored. So that's a weird one, where that goes. Let's see if we can bring in the other road, the road that leads to... Do we have Vistolfveg in here? Yeah, we do. So we should bring in the one that goes to the playground, since the playground is in there already, and give it a material. And we have to give it some dimension. So once again, we'd select all of it and then do the extrusion in Z, but very little. And then export it. And this is the one to the playground. Road to playground. Road to playground. All right. And let's see, Kids Front Street we will duplicate. We'll make this one road to playground. And put it as playground, Vistolfveg, road to playground. It does this weird thing because it's big, but it did come in. So you never know, and there's no collision issue here. So you got to keep trying and trying and trying. And as I said, once again, there's this thing where you can go in then and try to do the regions and click on a region and try to make your region as big as it can be, but you'll find that no matter how big you make it, when you actually go to move it, it's really tiny. And so you'd come out here and try to bring it to the point where it just touches, and then go and scale it or resize it as big as you can make it. And then try to move it. And I'll be darned if I know like why it's suddenly giving me grass. But it's very weird. And so you try to get down in there to get rid of those sort of ripples and folds and bring it up. And then you come in and you fill it in and you say okay, and then you have this ability to copy it and paste it and be putting your little terrain in there. And it's going to be a very uneven terrain. And you copy and paste and move it over, and copy and paste and move it over, and create the terrain that you like painstakingly with all those weird ripples in it. can see how there's a piece of terrain there that got opened up, so I'm going to fill that in there. And so what do I have going here? I have this bit of terrain with a street that never came in. But then what I do in here, and this is the crucial point, is once I have those things, the roads actually I don't want to use. What I want to do with the roads is I want to paint using the paint tool. I want to paint and use asphalt or cement. Doesn't seem to be any cement in here. So I'll use asphalt, and I want to come in here and I want to paint underneath the road. And you're thinking, am I painting under the road? I don't know. Let's see when we actually move the kid's front street down beneath. Yep. So even though it's above here, I'm coming in here and I'm painting it. And wouldn't it be nice if you could, if the paint tool was orthogonal, so that I could make an actual road that looked nice. But this is a guide, and even here I can now paint on that terrain to fill that in and paint this alleyway back here. And they're just suggestive for now, and then you can go back and do your, oh, that was bad, do your tweaking. Oh, shoot. But you start to paint, and like there's not much to paint here. This is, I don't have any terrain here. But when I move the terrain, that'll be there. This is there. And the road down to the playground. Should show up when I take the road to the playground and move it out of the way. Oh, it didn't really work because the terrain is so uneven. So you have to then go and work on, maybe it takes a lot of zooming in. Yeah, you got to get the right level of zoom as you build up your roads. And even that, because there's different bumps, it's not letting me. And what you do for contouring is you can grow or smooth regions down, but then you're going to end up, oops, I didn't want to do that with paint. Why is it doing that? It'll move stuff down until eventually we reveal, as we erode and erode and erode and erode, the playground area, which is hidden somewhere under here. And you can make the size a bit bigger, and you can increase the strength of the erosion tool, but eventually it's going to erode it until there's nothing underneath. Or you can hit subtract, and now you can see, now I'm subtracting great swaths of this to reveal the thing that's underneath. Except I can't tell if that's just empty sky. Well, some of it is empty sky. So this is where it begins to get tricky when you're dealing with contours, with height contours, how to make your terrain work for that. I'm going to have to fill this terrain back in and try to get it to slope. But I have the playground area down there, and the road would have to go down with the terrain. So I do want to keep this plane there, but this is the one that needs some terrain in there, and if I go in and I do grow, the grow is Ooh, it should be on grass. I can grow terrain around there, but it's really funky. It's making like hills and stuff. And that's not necessarily what we want here, to grow these hills. Because that's going to be really weird when we get into the game. It's like we're making a whole, look at that, we're making this whole thing here. And then you can come in as you hit grow, and then you can do all your subtraction to bring it down. But then it kind of disappears. So how do you fill in a terrain? That's the problem. And if you add, well, you can add underneath here, but it's sort of adding weird balls and bubbles. So that's going to make for a very funky playground. So the question is, where are we adding? Are we adding underneath like this? So it's going to take a lot of playing to get this terrain modified properly. You can see there's a plane under there, and I can sort of draw a big hill in there, which is going to be really crazy in the game. And in these areas here. So it looked like a bombed out nuclear landscape. We have to draw in. So there's a lot to be learned about doing this, but the fun thing, let me go back to paint here and go back to my asphalt. So yeah, the road leads up there, and for now the kids will recognize that there's a bike path that goes around their grassy knoll. Although I can't ride a bike on this with its crazy holes in the world. And we can begin to get the contours of their neighborhood, so that when we take this part of the road here, which is the front of the house, which is the kids' front street, and we move it out of the way, we can see that now we have where that was. And the same thing with the alley to the friend. We can remove that out of the way, and the back road to alley was never there. It didn't show up. And so the road to the playground is there, the alley to the friend, this one here. So we're getting a basic outline from the kids' house to the supermarket that we can begin to work with. And the same thing even with the super highway, the what is it called? Highway. It's there for reference. And if we then want to go and start popping objects into this, so for example, let's put in supermarket, and we won't have a Rava in there, but there is a supermarket. It's Walmart, and there's this supermarket.
Hello.
Hello, I'll be with you in a sec. Let's go for this supermarket. 24/7 supermarket. Let's go for this, and oh, it's too tiny, way too tiny. All right, we won't do that. Let's get rid of that. Maybe the Walmart is the only one that, yeah, it's the kind of one that fits there, although it's still a bit small. But let's rotate it and go around the other way, or maybe it goes this way, and hit F to get close to it, and then move it into position here. Oops. And I think now, because it's anchored, it won't rotate. So sometimes what happens is you need to go to the rotate tool and you need to uncheck it, and then you have more free rotation. Yep. Otherwise it rotates by 32 degrees and it moves by studs and things like that. So it's just a bit small, so we'll scale it if we can. We'll scale it up. Let's make sure that it is sitting on the ground. And we have the position right, so now with that Walmart there, we can take the Rava, which we called supermarket, and we were using it for sizing. We can hide it now. And the supermarket now sits on the ground. And we can take the kid's house now, which we have a marker for, and we can go house and see what comes up till we can actually build the thing. This basic family house kind of works. It's not perfect, but we can bring it in and move it and rotate it. And move it forward. Now here you don't want to resize it because this is sized for a Roblox character. Actually, this needs to be rotated a bit because it's sitting weird on the landscape. Alright, and so that house is there. Let's move this down because we can always move it up there. And it's actually not the right kind of house for this. Modern house may work better. And let's get rid of this one. And bring this modern house in. Again, then you want to then bring this one up again to see the location. Go to here, rotate it, and move it. Bring it to the ground there. Bring this down out of the way. And let's just duplicate this for now. So these houses are sitting next to one another. And let's also go to the friend's house and let's put in a modern home, a basic family home. Let's just do that there just for the fun of it and bring that under oriented. It was oriented that way, so now the basic family home here would be rotated like that, and move it into position, and then take the friend's house and bring it down out of sight. Put that there. And that gives the basic layout of the land. I'll save this, and I will go to look at playing it, although it's not responding. Okay, so now when I go to hit play, will it let me play? Yes, not responding. And boom, my character lands there. He lands right by the house. Now the house, as I said, is not at all like the real house of the kids, but at least now they can play and do that kind of thing. We can always change the house, but we have the right location, and that's what's crucial. So now we go out, and they can go down the street and to the earthquake distorted supermarket. And inside there, but of course the doors don't open on that one. And so we go from there to back down on the gravel road, and we see where the house is. If we want to go to the friend's house, we go down the road, and then there is the alleyway, and then going back from the alleyway, oops, gotta jump over that. Seems like things are a bit too big. And then inside that house, and upstairs and downstairs, and so we're getting the basic layout. And maybe 5 times large, which usually works, isn't working as well. As we go down toward the place where the playground is, you can see that this is how we made it really low. But that is the level, and then we get stuck over there, and we're stuck inside. So it's beginning to look like a monster nightmare thing, and we can't fly. But that's the basic idea for beginning to position stuff relative to the actual map that is here. And it's going to take some doing to actually get everything in there, but that's how we do it. And then when we want to go to publish, we publish it to Roblox as, and I'm just going to overwrite this and make this in Roblox, make this name. This now is no longer an Ubu or whatever it was. So I'm going to hit edit. Oops, I didn't want to edit like that. That's not what I meant. I wanted to go into here and then call this the kids neighborhood, and I'll make it public, and I will save it. And then when I'm actually in the game, anybody can actually join this, but it'll be this big mess. And I'll just keep having to go back in and edit it. This is now live on the game server, and boom, there's the character. But I can then always go back in and edit stuff as I work on the layout and populate it using the pieces from here so that they're in basic relative proximity to one another. And I hope that that helps somewhat, and we will we'll try to proceed from there. Thanks. Bye.